In 16th century Scotland, a large 45-member family lived in a cave in Ballantrae on Scotland's southwest coast. Alexander Bean, also known as Sawney, was the head of this family. What makes this family special though, is that they were thought to have murdered and cannibalised over 1,000 people in the span of 25 years. The Cannibalistic Bean family would ambush their victims by the dozen. They were then killed, dragged to a cave and butchered. What they couldn't eat, they pickled and preserved, and what they couldn't preserve, they tossed into the sea. Their reign of terror would eventually be stopped by a king. This is the story of Sawney Bean. In recent times, the stories of Hannibal Lecter and the real-life horrors of Jeffrey Dahmer have provided chilling accounts of cannibalism. However, Scotland can lay claim to one of the most gruesome horror tales ever recounted, the legend of Sawney Bean. Sawney Bean was born in East Lothian, approximately 9 miles east of Edinburgh. The son of a hedge and ditcher, he became a tanner by trade. However, hard work was not his forte, and he eventually decided to give up making an honest living and fled to County Galloway with his new bride, Agnes Douglas, who apparently shared his inclinations for human flesh. Here they found residence at Bennen Cave. The cave was 180 meters deep and was a perfect hideout, with tunnels penetrating the solid rock and extending for more than a mile in length. Furthermore, twice a day at high tide, the cave's entrance was flooded for several hundred meters, making it almost impenetrable. From this subterranean lair, Sawney Bean hatched his plans for his family's future. With honest labour out of the question, he decided to turn to robbery and began to ambush travellers with military precision. To ensure he wasn't caught, he made a point of not letting anyone he ambushed escape alive. This continued for quite a few years while the Bean family grew. However, due to the family growing to a very large size, reaching upwards of around 45 sons, daughters, grandsons and granddaughters, which most likely involved incest, the family struggled to feed itself. With a fresh supply of meat in the form of human corpses from their ambushes, they resorted to cannibalism. The bodies were taken to the cave where they were butchered and pickled to preserve for eating later. It wasn't long, however, before body parts started washing up on nearby beaches to the cave, which were discovered by locals. As the missing persons list grew, some people unfortunately blamed local innkeepers for the murders, and a few innocents were imprisoned in attempts to try and stop the killings. Several organised searches were also launched to find the culprits. Documents show that one search group took note of the cave, but the men refused to believe anything human could survive living in it and did not enter. The fortunes of Sawney Bean and his cannibal family finally took a turn for the worse around the year 1600. The family had attacked a man and his wife who were travelling on horseback from a local country fair. They quickly dragged the unfortunate wife from her horse, where she was promptly stripped and disemboweled. The husband, however, was able to stay on top of his horse and fight off the family with a pistol and sword. The attack stopped when a group of around 30 travellers who had also been at the fair came upon the awful scene. The Bean family, now realising they were outnumbered, retreated back to their cave, leaving the husband and the passerbys with the mutilated corpse of his wife. The traumatised husband was swiftly taken to see the Chief Magistrate of Glasgow, who reported the crime to King James himself. James had a keen interest in hunting out witchcraft, and these crimes so enthralled him that he took a small army of 400 men armed with bloodhounds. Initially, despite their best efforts, no sign of the Bean family lair was discovered, But it wasn't long before the bloodhounds eventually led them to the cave entrance. Carefully, the troops entered the Bean family cave and were treated to an almost unbelievable sight. One soldier would later document,
"All round the walls, rows of human body parts were hung up to dry. Around the surface, barrels filled with limb and piles of clothing with jewellery and other personal possessions from their victims lay."
The Bean family initially attempted escape, but being vastly outnumbered by the 400 soldiers, soon gave themselves up without resisting. The family were taken to Tolbooth Jail in Edinburgh, and some men remained behind to bury the human remains found in the cave. So severe were the crimes, and so clear the guilt, that no offer of a trial was given, and the very next day the family were taken to a northern part of Edinburgh City for execution. Sawney and his sons had their genitalia cut off and thrown into fires, their hands and feet severed from their limbs, and were left to bleed to death. Sawney shouted his last dying words, "It isn't over, it will never be over." After watching the men die, Agnes Bean, her daughters, and the rest of the children were tied to stakes and burned alive. A single survivor of the Bean family was a daughter who had left and previously settled in the town of Girvan. However, after her family's capture and exposure, the daughter's identity was revealed by angry locals who hanged her from the bough of a tree, which today is named the Hairy Tree, which can still be found in the town. It is not known for sure how many victims of the Bean family there were, but numbers range from 1,000 to 5,000. Some say the events never even took place, and that it was anti-Scottish propaganda aimed at countering the rebel Jacobite sympathies. Whatever the truth is though, the legend of Sawney Bean and his family continue to live on in Scottish culture and folklore. And if you are ever visiting the Ayrshire coast in Scotland, be sure to give Ben and Cave a visit.